Up with what Gary's been talking about the past few weeks. He's been talking about sharing your faith, and so the most obvious choice to me was to talk about gardening, which is obviously what you were all expecting. It's the natural progression, sharing your faith, gardening, other household chores, those types of things. But we'll get around to how that actually makes sense. Anybody, show of hands, has anybody grown a garden before? Is anybody currently growing a garden? Okay, so not a new concept entirely to us. Generally describe gardening as very easy, right? Little work, lots of reward, not a very difficult task. Most people could do it, right, Meredith? Yes? Just basically anyone can do it. You don't really have to do very much if you want to plant a garden and have lots of vegetables. Just plant one and then just don't even worry about it for about 2 months. Come out, you'll have all kinds of vegetables. That's how it works. So our family are gardeners. My grandmother grew up in the Depression era. That was their main source of food. They were very poor, and they lived on a farm, and that was how they got most of their food. So that was something that was taught into her children, and my mother took that to heart. She cans and freezes lots of vegetables and fruits and jams and all kinds of stuff like that, to my great benefit. And in fact, I think the first time I had a store-bought vegetable was at school, and I just thought it was kind of offensive. I just, what is this? Is not a green bean. I've had green beans before. Where are the real green beans, and what have you done with them? Kind of situation. And so I've grown many gardens. I can't say that I was very helpful with most of them, probably. We had a garden my grandparents live in Columbus and have 35 acres. They plant a big garden generally every year. And when we lived in Columbus, before Dad went into the ministry, we would just kind of go over to their garden and help them. And Mom would go help with freezing and canning and all that stuff, help with pulling weeds and all the things that you have to do with a garden. Well, then Dad went into the seminary and we moved. And we moved to Wilmore, Kentucky, and we had about a 700 square foot duplex and a tiny little backyard. So we had a very small little garden. Didn't hold very much, didn't take a whole lot of work because it was really small. And we had tomatoes and maybe some green beans, or I don't remember exactly what we had there. But then Dad got his first church appointment, and that's the garden. When I think of a garden, that's the one I think of. Because when we moved in, we had about a 4-acre lot was what the parsonage sat on. And so we had a significant amount of room to garden. And I don't know if it was my parents' eyes getting really big that were just like, oh, we got space here. We're gonna do a garden. And they had forgotten about all the work part. Or if, the member of the congregation that came with their tractor and plowed it just said, the pastor's going to be tired. Because they plowed approximately a football field size, or so I imagined it. I've been told by my dad, as I did some back research here, that it was about a 16 by 40 foot garden, which is still a pretty good size. A lot of gardening. It's a lot to tend to when you go from a tiny little plot with maybe 3 tomato plants and some little stuff, and then you go to this big garden. So we were actually assigned, because it's a pretty sizable garden. My sister and I, 6 and 8 years old, were assigned rows of the garden that were under our responsibility. I think the thought process from my naive parents was to alleviate some of their responsibility. 6 and 8 year olds, you can imagine how that really worked. We enjoyed riding bikes more than we enjoyed dealing with our sections of the garden. And so a lot of times, our sections didn't get a whole lot of work done with them. And like I said, that's okay, because gardening is very easy and plants are all very forgiving. We had lots of plants growing in ours. A lot of them we didn't even want. We actually hadn't planted most of them. So what do you know, the next year the garden was significantly smaller. We decided, those 6 and 8 year old, maybe at 7 and 9, they're not going to be a whole lot more useful. Maybe we're going to downsize our garden a little bit, and that was fine. But so now, many of you are probably wondering what this has to do with anything and thinking, is he going to tell garden stories the entirety of today? And the answer is yes and no. But I'm going to do this and see if it's as difficult as Gary sometimes makes it look. I got nothing here. Yes, I can vouch for Gary. It's not always cooperative. So if we can get I got nothing. It has an on button. That's helpful. Yeah, okay. I'm not going to give Gary any more grief about this now. Oh, there you go. What do you know? I don't know. If you want to go to the next one, that's fine. Yeah, perfect. So about 3 weeks ago in our Sunday school class, we're reading through Matthew, and we're reading this verse, and it's been stuck in my head. And so as I was trying to decide what to speak to you about this morning, I kind of thought, if God has placed a verse on your heart that you can't get out, there's probably a reason for that. And so this is what I settled on. And so if you want to read along with me, it's Matthew 9:35 through 38. Jesus went through all the towns and villages, teaching in their synagogues, proclaiming the good news of the kingdom and healing every disease and sickness. When he saw the crowds, he had compassion on them because they were harassed and helpless, like sheep without a shepherd. Then he said to his disciples, "The harvest is plentiful, but the workers are few. Ask the Lord of the harvest, therefore, to send out workers into his harvest field." Now, maybe that doesn't immediately say garden to you, but in my brain, God said garden. So I thought, okay, well, let's see what it is that you're wanting me to get out of this. And as I kind of dug into this, I thought, Jesus looks out over this area that he's traveling, and this is right before he's getting ready to send out the disciples, and he's looking at the people, and he sees pain and suffering. He sees harassed people and helpless people and people in need, and it breaks his heart. And he's going to send disciples out to deal with this. And in my mind, I'm thinking, this is our garden. This is our sphere of influence. Jesus is here. These are the people who he's interacting with, who he can see on a regular basis. And this is his garden. He's been placed here, and we've been placed here where we are and where we work. And that's our garden. That's our rows that us as 6 and 8-year-olds are supposed to be attending to. It's our job to deal with them. And so I started thinking about Park County and just the area that I interact with, and that in terms of a garden. So that's kind of what we're going to talk about today, is the process of that. And the first step with any garden is caring for the soil. It's not one that I thought about when I made my first garden. Next garden story here. I know you're very excited. When I planted my first garden that didn't have anything to do with my parents, all the hard stuff that they did that I thought was actually the hard stuff. Has anybody ever used a tiller before? Those things are just the worst. If you want to have sore shoulders and use it wrong, that's the best way to have really sore shoulders the next day. I tilled our garden, put this together. We lived in Dana, and I was very excited about this garden. I just knew it was going to come out great. Did all the work, did all of this preparation, planted all the seeds. Everything started coming up. My broccoli did really well, and I was very excited because it was the first thing to come up, and everything was coming after. And I thought, all right, I'm good at gardening. I did a really good job. Gardening is easy. I don't know why Mom and Dad made it sound so difficult. And my tomatoes were coming on, and they weren't coming on very well like I expected, but I don't eat a ton of tomatoes, and I wasn't too worried about it. And I was getting ready to pick them about 2 days before, and I started looking at them and noticed that it looked like somebody had held matches under every one of my tomatoes. I thought, this is the weirdest vandalism I've ever heard of. Why is somebody burning my tomatoes? And some of you are nodding, so you probably already know what it is that this is. I had no clue, and so I called my mom, because she's my gardening consultant. I'm like, Mom, either I've got a weird neighbor who has way too much time. We lived very near Laney and Quinn at this time, so I'm not going to incriminate them, but I'm just saying it was strange. But she informed me of something called blossom rot, which I'd never heard of, but it has to do with a deficiency in the soil. It doesn't matter how good I do caring for the plant. It doesn't matter how clean I keep the garden. It doesn't matter any of the watering or anything like that. The soil was deficient. There was a problem with the place I had planted them, and nothing that I really did, had I not prepped the soil and made it better, was going to give me a better crop, right? I was limited by that. And in my mind, the soil is the community that we find ourselves in, the area that we live in. Poor soil yields poor fruits. If we don't take care of the soil, it's very hard to plant good seeds and have them be successful in lousy soil. So where we live matters, and it mattered to Jesus. The things going on when there's injustice in our community, when there is struggle, or if there is a drug problem, or if there is poverty or hunger or racism, any of these things that are going on in our community, those break God's heart, and those break down our ability to grow seeds well. You can plant all the seeds that you want, but if you don't care about the community, you're going to get only the amount that can grow in a lousy community. And that's one of those things that's hard because, we kind of focus sometimes on, sometimes you're very good at one thing or the other thing. You're very good at planting seeds, or you're very good at taking care of the community. And the problem that you run into sometimes is that if you don't remember the second part, if you tend to the soil and you make sure that it's really good, you get a really good patch of dirt. If you forget to plant the seeds, that's the second part. Just what everybody wants with their garden. They look at a garden and they say, I would like to have the best patch of dirt in town. I don't really care so much about the plants, but my dirt is going to be awesome. Well, that's what we do when we focus too much on community. We don't focus on involving ourselves in the community in order to proclaim the gospel. We focus ourselves on the community to make things easier for us. That's a problem, because then we end up with a lot of dirt and not a lot of fruit. And if you leave it alone, then you end up with a lot of dirt with weeds that grow excellently. Because you don't actually seed it with the things that are needed. You're taking care of the fun things, the community things, the things that lift everyone up around us. And those are important, but the next step is to plant those seeds. And if we're not planting those seeds, we're going to struggle as a church to grow regardless of the community that we find ourselves in. Everything could be perfect in our community. We could have absolutely everything set up to grow, and God could be saying, just get out there and do it. I've given you everything that you need to make this work, so just get out and do it. And if we don't do it, if we don't get out and share our faith with people, if we don't interact with people honestly, and we don't have those one-on-one relationships and build and share how Jesus has affected our lives and impacted us and share that with others, we're not going to have any progress. Nothing is going to change. We're not going to grow. And so this is not the most easy thing for any of us to do. Gary's been speaking about this. It's hard for me sometimes to find a time where I could even interact with somebody who's not a Christian in a real way. I don't know if that's the situation that you find yourself in. Maybe you're surrounded by believers, and that's sometimes a little bit of a burden, because you almost have to go out of your way to find somebody to talk to Jesus about, because everybody that you know maybe is from church or are believers. Maybe that's not the case with you, but I know there are some times where I feel that way. I feel like, man, everybody I talk to is a Christian. Who am I supposed to talk to about Jesus who doesn't already know? Well, bottom of the page there, pray for opportunities to share your faith. I have never once found God to come up empty on one of those requests. It's kind of like Dad always says, praying for patience will result in twins. When you ask for God to give you things, He helps you develop them. He's not going to give you this opportunity that's going to be really easy all the time. He's going to require you to step out and do something. And sometimes that's going to be really uncomfortable, because you're going to say, number one, and this is what I always say, and I'm sure that you've said it too, I don't have a clue what to say. I will say something stupid. Now, unlike me, you may be in luck because maybe you don't say stupid things all the time. It's sort of the status quo for me. So when I say stupid things, people just think, oh, Chris is talking. It's fine. But it's one of those things where if you pray for that opportunity, God will present it to you. He might not make it easy for you, but He will be there through that process. People don't want to hear Scripture directly in those interactive moments. If they don't know it, that's gonna fall on deaf ears. We know that. The Scripture tells us people don't understand the things of God. But you know what they do understand is how God affected your life. God gave you a story to tell, and He put you in front of a person to tell that story because you know something that can impact them. Worry about the other stuff later. You can bring Gary to the other things later. You can go grab somebody and bring them later to a lunch with somebody and talk to somebody about the things you don't know the question. Gary said last week, I believe, that he told our builder for our building that he didn't know. That's okay. He's the pastor. He didn't know the answer, and he had to look it up and find out some more. That's perfectly fine to say, but don't let that be a block for not sharing your faith with somebody because you feel like you're inadequate to do it. Talk about how Jesus has affected you. You know that part, that your story is something you can always share. And so the next part is watering the garden. If all you do is plant the seeds and you've taken care of the soil, but then you do, like I said, and you just leave it alone for 60 days, and that's how long the green beans said they were supposed to go. I should have green beans in 60 days. Who's going to come break them for me so that I can eat them, right? That's the fun part. You have to feed the garden. If you don't, it will grow as much as it is capable of feeding itself. If you have hard times, your garden's going to dry up. If you don't water it, if you don't provide nourishment, well, that's what we do here at the church, and that's why the church is so important. And a lot of times you'll hear people who will say, why should I be connected to a body? Well, that's why. Your garden needs water. You can't do it on your own. You're going to run into situations you don't know how to deal with. If you have children, you're running into those situations probably all the time. I know that we are. It's always helpful to have somebody give some words of wisdom who is dealing with children who are doing the same obnoxious things that our children do from time to time. I know that's impossible to believe. Zoe is a perfect angel. You can't imagine her being crazy, but come over sometime really close to nap time when she hasn't eaten, and you might get a different perspective on my beautiful little child. Some of those things are difficult. It's hard for us to know all of the answers given the experiences that we have. And so that's what the body is a benefit for. It helps water the garden and keep us healthy. And we are going to go out into the community and share with other people, with non-believers. It's going to be really hard to do that if we're coming back empty all the time with nowhere to refill, with no source to go out and refresh us for going out into the world. So that's what the body is for. And that's why it's important to be connected to things like discipleship in the one-on-one capacity, in small group and in fellowship with other believers. That's really important. Bible study, those things are crucial to going out and being effective in the sphere that you have influence on. If you don't have those things, you're going to constantly be running on empty. You're going to get frustrated. I mean, if you speaking as somebody who has at points have been away from the church, you don't know it makes a difference until you come back. And all of a sudden you wonder, that's why I felt so crummy all the time. That's why I was such a grouch and so unpleasant to be around. I didn't realize that I was running on empty. So when you hear that, that's when you hear people say, I don't really know why I need to be involved with the church. Well, when a hard time comes along, and Jesus talks about this in the parable of the sower, when hard times come along, if you're not deeply rooted in your faith, if you're not connected to a body that cares about you and cares about bringing glory to God, that you're going to have problems. And I really strongly dislike this thing, just so you guys know. Where am I supposed to point this? Okay, Gary always points it all over. I've never known. Okay, it's back there. Cool. So this is everybody's favorite part. This was really the main responsibility that we were given as 6 and 8 year olds. Was the mom and dad didn't expect us to prepare soil or all that, but we had to pull weeds. And I know some of you are thinking, I can think of at least one weed we would like to pull, get them off the stage. And we're not talking about people when I talk about pulling weeds, but I'm talking about difficulties in the church, because did you guys know that there are sometimes difficulties in the church? Has somebody ever irritated you in the church? Anyone? If it's me, don't say anything, please. But people are irritating. You are probably irritating. I don't know if you know this. All of us probably are irritating people at some time or other, because we're human and we are a little bit self-centered. We get very focused on me, especially if we're hungry. Like hungry 4-year-olds, very focused on themselves, and it doesn't really change with adults. Ask my wife. Get hungry enough, we become very focused on me. And the problem with weeds is they just get worse. If you leave them for a week, they're pretty bad. If you leave them for 2 weeks, they're bigger than your actual garden plants. You want to deal with weeds early, and the same is true in the body. When you have arguments, disruptions, conflict, when you have issues in the body, you need to nip those things quickly, because those can be very disruptive to a church body. And we can't reach our community if we can't deal with problems in our own church community, right? We're supposed to love one another. I don't know if you guys know that, but we're supposed to love one another like family, and sometimes that means we love one another like family and we drive each other crazy. But we're supposed to love one another in a way that tells us that we care enough about one another to give hard truths to each other. We care enough about one another to get rid of those things that cause conflict. One of the things that I think of when I think of weeds in church is transparency. And I don't know if that's something that's on your heart. One of the things that bothers me is I don't really want to be a part of a church where I have to come in and tell you I'm doing fine if I'm heartbroken. I don't want you to have to come and tell me, everything's great, and then walk away going, man, I feel awful. That's not a loving body. Now I know when we're greeting in the morning, it's not great if you collapse into sobs onto somebody while we have 2 minutes of time to mill about. And I get it, you don't always love that. I mean, sometimes you want I'm fine, yeah. But if we never get any deeper than that, how are we helping one another? How are we loving one another? Sometimes we're drowning in problems. We're completely stressed out, and nobody ever says that while you're talking to somebody. How are you doing? Well, miserable. How are you? Great. Nobody does that, and sometimes I wish that you could, because that's where we really start to be able to heal one another. There are gifts. There are some encouraging people in this congregation, and it's really hard to know if they need to encourage you if you tell them you're fine all the time, right? And that can be a weed, because then there are other people who come in who go, man, everybody has it always has it together in this church. Nobody ever has any problems. I'm just telling you, if you're thinking, and I'm thinking of kids again because this is us, but if you're thinking, man, the Blystone kids, I wish my kids would behave anything like them. We will make a video, okay? I will make a video and send it to you, compiled of our children being crazy. They are crazy just like your children are crazy. We struggle just like anyone struggles, and it's very easy to come into this church sometimes, and because of no transparency, to look at others and go, man, everybody has it together. I am the only one whose life is a mess. Well, that's not true. It's not true. I don't know if maybe you may be the only other one. Maybe it's just Molly and I and you, but you're not completely alone, right? And when we let those things grow up and we let those uncertainties, that just creates problems in the body. It makes it really hard to love one another if we're constantly worried about how we look in front of others. Don't want to embarrass ourselves. We don't want us to look like a mess. Well, if you're a mess, look like a mess. Can't fix a mess if you don't know there is one. Now the best part, this is the part that everybody really nobody plants a garden to pull weeds, right? Nobody puts that in, I need some reason to pull some weeds. We plant a garden for the fruits of our labors. You plant one because you like vegetables, or because if it's a flower garden, because you like to see flowers. So we do this with all of this goal in mind, that we're bringing glory to God, that we are bringing light to other people, that our garden could flourish and be a beacon. I don't know if if you've ever had a really good garden going, if somebody's ever come and talked to you, and they've seen it and they've said, your garden is awesome, it looks great. Or even sillier, they've said, I think I'm going to start a garden because that person's garden is really good. That's a silly thing to do, don't do that. But a flourishing garden is attractive. It's something that it's hard to go by and see it and not go, man, I want a part of that. And I want something like that. And that's what our garden should look like. That's what we should be concerned with, making the sphere of influence that we have around us to be a beacon where other people look at it and go, I need to have a part of that. I don't care what it takes. I don't care what is involved. I want to go talk to the people who are doing that well, and I want to be a part of it. And it's not only is it something that we should be doing that's a great thing to be doing, it's something that Jesus commands us to do. In the Great Commission, he tells us this is our job. Tending to the sphere that we're given, that's what we're here for. We're not here to coast. We're not here to do things that are easy. We're here to do a hard job. We're here to do some things that are going to make us uncomfortable. They're going to take time of ours that we don't think we have to give. They're going to take talents of ours that we're not sure that we have. And God has put that job before us. And so I want to look at some numbers here. So this is some general numbers that could be totally wrong, because Wikipedia has been known to lie. And I'll blame them entirely if these are incorrect entirely, but we've got 17,000 people or around there in Park County, and Rockville has about 2,600. And we average about 130 to 140 people every Sunday. And those numbers are convicting to me, because I am not great at math, but I know that is less than 1% of our county. And, the objective is not to shame anyone or make you feel ashamed of the job that we're doing. There are great things happening in this church, but it should definitely leave you with something that my good friend Roger Bear refers to as divine discontent. And if you don't have that, these numbers should give it to you, because this shouldn't be a number we're okay with. I don't know about you. I don't know if you were like me and you were assigned to help with a garden as a kid. But if I would have gone to mom and dad and said, well, Mom, Dad, I want you to go ahead and check out my portion of the garden. I got almost 1% of it completely weeded. It's going to be awesome. I don't think I would want to have that conversation with my parents. I don't think I would want to stand in front of them and say, the responsibility that you put before me, I had to play though, Mom. My bike, have you seen my bike? It's cool. I wanted to ride. There's a hill near our house. I needed to ride down it. There's a ramp. You should see it. It's cool. I had other things I needed to do. I had some homework to focus on. There were a lot of things going on, Mom. I was very busy. I remember that I thought about the garden many times. But there were some things that happened. It's okay. There's at least 3 tomatoes. They're going to be delicious. Now, I'm being a little facetious, but that's something that we're going to have to stand before God and answer for, our sphere of influence, what did we really do? What did we really give of ourselves to make sure that portion of our sphere of influence was as well taken care of as we could make it? Did we give of everything? Did we get done and go, man, I'm spent. I couldn't have done anything else. Maybe I didn't have the impact that I wanted, but you know what? I couldn't I could stand before God with an honest heart and say I gave everything that I had to give of all of the talents that he put before me and say, I did what I could do. I think that's probably one of those things we really need to be thinking about over the coming months, because we're going to have, hopefully here very soon, a chance to interact with our prospective new associate pastor. And I really pray that he's going to come in with a fire for stuff like this, with these numbers, that's going to come in and say, hey, you're doing a great job in many things, but let's do more. Let's do other things. And that's going to create some work for all of us, because as soon as the garden gets bigger, there's more weeds, there's more soil, there's more watering to be done. All of those things are important, and you may not feel like you are really good at any one of those things, or you may feel like, I don't really know how I can serve in fellowship or in discipleship. I don't feel like maybe I'm comfortable doing that, but I know that there is a ministry to this community that I think would be important, that could help the soil and give an inroad for somebody to start sharing the gospel with people. Or maybe you're really good at the sharing portion and you think, I don't know what any of those other parts look like, but I'm going to go talk to people. And that's the thing that I can do. And maybe it's one of those other parts that you really have a heart for. And if you don't have a heart for any of those parts, I hope that you're going to be praying that God will reveal to your heart what your job should be in there, because this is not a spectator sport. This is not one of those where you get to eat from the garden if you don't get involved in the process kind of situations. I got that as a kid, but in the church, you don't get to be a kid anymore. You don't get to say, I get to be a taker. I am going to be a part of this, and I'm going to help build this. And I hope that you're praying for God to reveal how that is going to be. Because we've got some big things ahead. We've got some big challenges that we're going to be facing, and we have a big mountain to climb. And I think that should be in our sights the whole time, that, how are we going to do better with what God has given us, and appreciate the things that we've done now. But always be looking forward, always having that divine discontent in our hearts, and know how we're going to move forward. So I hope that's your prayer. I promise you God will answer that prayer. If you ask the question, you may not like the answer. Listen anyway. God will come through. He will be at your back, and you have a group of people around you who care about you, who will do the same. But if you would you bow your heads in prayer with me? Dear Heavenly Father, we thank you that you are faithful, and that you know that even though we don't necessarily see those gifts in ourselves, that you have assigned tasks to us. You have assigned a mission to us, and that you know you're going to be behind it, even when we can't see what that looks like, even when we're not sure, even when we're busy. I thank you that you are behind us in all of it, that you have a plan, and that you know how you're going to use us in it. I pray that you'll reveal that to us and give us a heart for those lost people that are in our sphere of influence, that we have trouble sleeping at night, that we struggle if we aren't doing everything we can to reach them for you. And I pray that you will go with us as we struggle with that, and that you will speak to us, and not just have us be uncomfortable, but have us know what it is you have for us. I pray that you will be with Gary and Lori as they're traveling, and as they are spending time in fellowship with this prospective associate pastor, and that you would bless that meeting and be with them as they're talking, and guide the hands of the search team as they are kind of planning this process and helping to move us forward into this next phase, and be with us as that entire process goes on and throughout our week as we go. Pray all these things in your name, Father. Amen.